Okay, so again, I'd like to welcome everyone this evening for the last class in this Introduction to Meditation course. So over the previous classes, we've learned about the fundamentals of meditation, and we've learned a few different meditation techniques. But one of the things I'm sure everyone's discovered in doing it on your own and stuff is that it's not always so easy. Even when we have we have the instructions, we have it very clearly written out what to do. Um, we find that difficulties come up, and this is completely normal. This is just part of meditation, and it's so normal that the Buddha actually even broke a lot of these difficulties that come up into different categories. And he called these in Pali, or the language of the Buddhist scripts, he called these the Nivaranas, or the five hindrances. So these are these things which will come up in your meditation, and they come up for everyone. But you might find that sometimes you'll go through a period where you don't have any coming up. And you just feel every time you meditate, it just feels great. And then you might go through a period where you have one in particular is coming up, maybe one is coming up strongly, or another period where you're coming up where one doesn't come up so strongly. And so it's just a normal thing. These will come and go. And so it's just something we all have to deal with. When I was a just about to ordain as a novice. This was back 20 years ago in Thailand. There's myself and this other person getting ready to ordain as a novice. And this very, very senior English monk came. And he had been living in Sri Lanka just alone in the forest for about a decade. And he was coming back, and he was just this super austere, super like hardcore forest monk, and very impressive. And this other person who was going to ordain as a novice as well, he was asking him, he was like, "Oh, Ajahn, we're about to ordain as novices. Can you give us some advice, for ordaining and become going forth?" And this senior monk just goes, "The mind is a tricky thing." So very, very short advice, but it's very true. Our mind is tricky, and it can throw up all kinds of different distractions. So this is just something, we have to learn to how to overcome these different uh hindrances, these different distractions which can come up. Some of them, we can sometimes overcome on our own, just by meditating. Say, our mind feels really scattered, and then we just start watching the breath, and they might go away. But a lot of times we have to give special attention to them. So the five of them are, the first one is called kama chanda, which means like sensual desire or sensual craving. Then we have Vyapada, which means like ill will or aversion. Um, then we have Tina Middha, which is dullness and drowsiness. Then we have Udacha Kukucha, which is the most fun of them to say. So that is like restlessness and agitation. And the fifth one is Vicha Kicha, which means doubt. And so again, these are all going to come up, and we can learn little techniques and stuff to overcome them. And the Buddha also gave these really great similes to kind of describe the way that it feels when these hindrances are coming up. So the first one is kamachanda. So this is sensual desire. So this is wanting some kind of sensual pleasure. This is this wanting, this attraction towards something. So you might find, you're meditating, and you get into some kind of fantasy, or you just start really thinking about, "Oh, I can't wait to go have some pizza after this. I'd love to have some pizza," or any type of sensual pleasure, sensual gratification. So the Buddha, for these similes, he compared it to, if you're looking into a pot, and you're trying a pot full of water, and you're trying to see your reflection in it. And he said, having sensual desires, he said it's like water with a whole bunch of different colored dyes floating around the top. Kind of the way, like, if you've ever seen like gasoline float on top of water, like that, with different types of dyes. And you look at it, and that's how so much how it is. It's like, you're trying to see a reflection, but you're getting distracted by all the pretty things, and they look nice, and the colors look nice. So it's like that with the sensual desire. When when it comes up, your mind gets distracted by it. It's nice, it's appealing, it's attractive. But the Buddha gave this other really great simile for it. He said when central desire comes up in the mind like that, he said it's like being in debt. And I know that sounds completely different, right? But when you're in debt, you're all of a sudden in debt, you owe the bank some money. You're all about getting out of that debt and getting back to being normal, getting back to the way things were. And it's like that when central desire comes up in the mind. We're doing okay, everything feels okay, but then all of a sudden we get a desire for something, and we want to get that object to get rid of that desire, to get rid of that wanting for it. So it's very similar when these central desires come up in the mind. So one of the things is we can just to try to deal with this, we can just be aware of them. First, just know it. Okay, this is desire. This is central desire coming up, and sometimes just knowing it and seeing it from that different angle instead of being completely lost in it, seeing like, okay, yeah, this is desire coming up, and looking like that. Sometimes that can remove it, or sometimes just watching it, watching the experience of desire. Because one of the things you'll notice is it's even though there's a certain aspect of it we think is pleasant or wanting that pleasant thing, but if you really look at the experience of it, it's a very unpleasant, it's that wanting that, oh, I feel, I need to get this to feel happy. You don't think that, but on like the felt level, you have that feeling, I need that to get happy. And so you can look at it, examine it like that. Um, uh, you can practice contentment with what you have right now. So, if you're like, you start fantasizing about getting a new car or something, and you can just practice contentment. No, you know what I've got right now is okay. Or even what's happening right now when I'm sitting, it's okay. This is good enough. And really develop that sense of contentment. And this can help reduce those sensual desires. Or one of the things that we unfortunately this course we won't get to it. Last year we had 10 weeks instead of 5 weeks. So would be something like also contemplating the body. And when we do body contemplation, that can reduce these sensual desires. And so yeah, so that they're not so much of hindrance and don't get in the way of our meditation. The second one is Vyapada, or ill will or aversion. And the Buddha, the simile for it he used was again to that pot of water, but he said it's like a pot of boiling water. And I always think this is such a great simile for it because that's really how it feels when you're getting really angry, right? It has that heat to it. It has that energy that, the boiling water has. And again, you can't see clearly, like I've said before, when that anger comes up in the mind, that aversion, that ill will, it completely clouds the way you see reality. If you're angry at someone, all of a sudden everything they've ever said and done is wrong, and you can only see the wrong things they did. And then all of a sudden the anger's gone and it's like, yeah, he's not so bad. He's actually a good guy. He's done some good things before. So it's really when that ill will comes up, and especially if you're trying to make the mind peaceful, it's just so disturbing, right? And you can just proliferate on it. And the Buddha was saying that one of the differences between ill will uh and sensual desire is ill will is actually, and this aversion, it's actually easier to get rid of because it's such a unpleasant feeling, right? When you get angry, you get frustrated with someone, you feel unpleasant. Like there's nothing about it where you're like, oh, that felt really good. I'm really glad I got angry. And so it's a very unpleasant feeling. So it's easier for us to get rid of. So one of the things I find is trying to slow things down a bit. So a lot of times, when you are getting angry, you can feel like in your body, you feel it in your mind, and you start like speeding up, your thinking gets quicker, your breath gets quicker, your heart starts racing. So one of the things I find helps is to really just start like slowing things down. So I find, especially with the breath, take the breath a little deeper, a little slower breaths, and this can help, calm down. And then we can start using our contemplation and think, right now, does this matter? Whatever we're angry about, does it matter right now? Because if you're, say you're frustrated, angry at someone else, they don't even know you're angry at them right now, right? You're the only one suffering over this. They don't even know what's going on, and what you're thinking isn't going to affect any other situation. So, is this important right now? Or you can ask, say, if I was to die the next moment, or the next hour, is this the last thoughts I want to have? Is this the last mind states I'd want to have? And this reflecting in ways like this can help calm this down, or just stepping back and watching it and taking an interest in it as the emotion itself and being like, okay, let's observe anger. What does anger feel like? And again, you feel it in here. It's a thing, and just separating yourself from the anger and recognizing that, that anger is not me. That's just a mind state that has arisen, and it's impermanent. It's going to rise. It's going to pass away. So I'll also ask myself that, have I felt like this before? What happened? Did I stay angry like this? It's like, no, I felt like this. I was angry for a bit, and then, it ended up going away. And you're always glad afterwards that you didn't say or do anything when you were angry. Didn't do those things you were planning on doing, right? And so yeah, reflecting like that. Or one is we can develop the exact opposite of it. So actually actively bringing up loving kindness, and it doesn't mean we have to, if say we're meditating and we're getting angry at a specific person, something which happened earlier in the day, or, someone else in the meditation hall who's making some noise, or that, the dog barking outside or something like that. We can spread loving kindness to them, but we can also just bring up the loving kindness itself, and bring it up to ourselves or to everything. And then that can help dispel and dissipate that aversion. And the next one is Tina Mida. So usually when they translate this one as sloth and torpor, but that's really maybe like a 19th century intellectual way. We don't speak like that normally anymore. So it's better like drowsiness and dullness. So the Buddha, the simile he uses for this, again, the pot of water, and you're trying to see your reflection in it. And he said it's like water which is covered in like, like pond scum and slime and water plants. And I think that's a great like simile for it, because I don't know if anyone has had the experience of trying to meditate when you can barely stay awake or feeling, and it's like that. It's kind of this gross, thick feeling, And so I think it's a great simile for it. And again, this is something which, everyone has to go through at some time, this sleepiness and stuff. So sometimes this drowsiness, this dullness can actually arise just because you haven't slept enough, right? So this one kind of famous monk in Australia, he tells this story of he was teaching this meditation retreat, and this lady came, and she was like a business lady. And he said the first 2 days all she did was sleep. She didn't come to anything. She just slept the first 2 days because she was just so exhausted from work. And it's only once you stop and like start trying to calm down that all that exhaustion comes in. So after the first 2 days, she joined in the meditation, and she did great. He said she was like a star meditator. But before that, but she needed that rest. So sometimes that sleepiness can come from having not slept enough, being tired. It can also come from oversleep. Like one of the things you notice, if you oversleep, you get really dull as well. And so you'd think that you're getting more rest, and it wouldn't be that way, but it does work out like that. So but if you do find that even when you're properly rested and stuff, that when you meditate, that you do start getting really dull and drowsy and sleepy, then it's really clear that this is the hindrance coming up. And so there's many different little like ways you can do to deal with this. One of them, which is really great, is first is you can work on just sitting up straight, because what happens is when you start like getting dull and sleepy, your body starts like slouching forward, going into a more relaxed position. And the more relaxed the position is, the more sleepy you get. So sometimes sitting up straight, it kind of can wake you up. Or you can also meditate with your eyes open. So a lot of times, people think, because you see like the Buddha statues and stuff, and they've got their eyes closed, but you think it's necessary and you have to meditate with your eyes closed. But it's perfectly fine to meditate with your eyes open. And so with the eyes closed, it does shut off a whole lot of distractions. But if you're really tired, perfectly fine to try with your eyes open. One of the things you can do, you can try using a meditation object that uses more of the thinking mind. So one like something like the loving kindness, where you actually are thinking, you're using that thinking mind. And again, we didn't have enough uh, days in this course to get into them, but there's all kinds of different these reflective meditations you can do, such as body contemplation, death contemplation. There's all these different contemplations that there are for us to do, which use more of the thinking mind. And the Buddha also recommended we can do stuff like stand up, because it's okay to meditate standing up. He said you can pull on your earlobes. He said you could rub your limbs to wake them up. He said, if you really need to go out, wash your face, go out, look up at the stars, or walking meditation. Again, we didn't have time to cover it this time, but and do these things to just kind of wake yourself back up. Or like we went over with the body in the day about the body, sometimes more of these tactile ones, where you're doing something like moving mala beads, can wake you up a bit more. And so, or one of the things we can do, I was explaining to someone just before this, we have this one branch monastery, and the abbot is Lumpur Banjong, and he's got about 50 branch monasteries of his own, like hundreds of monks. But he has this, and he's really into training, and it's a real training monastery. And so he has this rule in his monastery that for the morning and evening meditation, all the monks have to sit with a matchbox on their head and sit with the matchbox on the head. Because what happens is when you start falling asleep, it slides off. And that's enough to feel, and then the sound it makes when it hits, enough to wake you back up. But then on top of it, he has a little game with it. So first time it falls off, no problem. Second time it falls off, no problem. Third time it falls off, you're only allowed to eat sticky rice and one bag of curry you got from your morning alms round. And so it kind of turned it into a bit of a game for everybody. And yeah, the monks from there sit up perfectly straight. And you don't have to add any type of food punishments or anything to it, but there's sometimes just that awareness that can help wake you up. And so, but again, like I said, these are ones, we all have to go through at some point. And then the fourth one is udacha kukucha. So this is restlessness and agitation. And so, the Buddha used the simile again of a pot of water, but it's this one where it's being blown by the wind. Like you ever see water and it's blown by the wind. So not quite to the extreme of that boiling water, but still it's a very moving thing. You can't really, you can't see things clearly. And it's very much like this when, that agitation comes up in the mind, and you're just thinking about this, you're thinking about that, you're, ants in your pants, that kind of thing, and you just can't sit. And yeah, a lot of times, especially if we're living, busy lives, active lives, our minds are so active that's just something, I find a lot of Westerners, really have to deal with in the beginning. Um, so I find for this one, it's also a really great way to work with this in the beginning is the same as with that anger, that like slowing things down, you know, working on the slower breaths. Because I find, again, similar to the anger, when I start, really thinking a lot, the breath gets quick, the breath gets fast, and slowing that down can help us relax. I find doing more of those meditations like the body scanning, stuff like that, again, which again absorbs some of that restlessness, is a really great way. You can also try the reflective meditations, to get the mind to thinking, using that thinking of the mind. Um, and so one of the also other things you can do is really watch what you're doing outside of your meditation. So one of the things you might notice is, if you drink, have too much caffeine that day, you notice everything, the mind starts racing, or you feel a little jittery. Or it can be also, if you're for some people, too much sugar, certain things can that you take into your body or into your mind can really affect you, because everything which goes in has some kind of effect, maybe small, maybe big. So I had this one good friend, and his mother had an anxiety disorder. Like, she was always worrying and stuff, and she went to a therapist. And one of the pieces of advice the therapist gave her was, he said, stop listening to the news first thing in the morning. And because it just gets you worrying, it gets it all worked up. And she did, and she said it completely changed her life. I mean, he gave other things to do as well, but she said this one just completely changed her life. So one of the things is, maybe watching, what we put in, or it's the same, like you see a kid, they go play video games for an hour and you notice they can be a lot more hyper than before that. So we can really watch the stuff we're putting into ourselves. And then the fifth and final one is this doubt. So the simile, sorry, the Buddha used for it, again with that pot of water, he said it's like a pot of water, like with mud in the bottom, when it's all been stirred up. Like you ever see like when like a pond or something and someone's walked through it and all that mud is stirred up into the water and it becomes like thick, muddy. It kind of looks like the Red River, right? Thick, muddy water. And he said not only that, he said then it's put into a dark room. So like there's no way you're seeing seeing your reflection in that. And so that's like what the doubts are. And and yeah, doubts, they can be very normal at some point, but I find a lot of times, yeah, some of us can and some people can really suffer strongly with doubts. And so the doubts can be about, say about the teaching and, oh, is what they were saying right? Did I understand it right? So one way to overcome those doubts is to, actually really having studied, really know the stuff. Um, but also one of the things is to work with this is to sometimes just really see doubt as doubt. Like because it's so convincing, all these things, and just to really look at it and be like, okay, this is doubt. This is doubt coming up in my mind. This isn't um it's not whatever I'm doubting isn't that's not real. It's just this is doubt. This is the experience of doubt. Let's look at this. Let's understand this. Let's not fall for it. And so, but one of the things I also find a lot of uh can happen to a lot of people, especially to a lot of the Westerners, is a lot of the doubts we have can be in ourselves. And so because like I've said before, we're so hard on ourselves and we can be so critical. So, you might be trying to meditate and it's like, oh, I can't do it. There's no way I'm going to do this. It's too hard for me. Other people can do this. I can't do this. And yeah, and just to recognize that again, that's doubt. That's being self-critical. The Buddha at one point he said to the monks, he's like, yeah, you guys can all do this. Like you can do this. I wouldn't be teaching you this if you couldn't do it. So it's like the Buddha guaranteed you can you can do this and get success at this. So it's really yeah, it's really important to recognize that as doubt and be like, no, I can do this. I'm okay. I'm not going to believe that little voice. I remember when I first, as a teenager, first started learning about Buddhism and meditation and stuff, that was one of the little teachings I read that, was really, really powerful and impactful for me was that you don't have to believe your own thoughts. And then later on, I learned to say, yeah, a lot of times it's usually better not to, but you don't have to believe those thoughts. So, when these doubts in yourself come up, yeah, don't believe them. You've and just watch that experience of doubt, and then and then, and yeah, and if you've developed enough, confidence in what you're doing, you understand it. So in this case, in regards to meditation, you've had classes in it now, or if you want to go on and learn more about it, you can say when the doubt comes up, you can say, no, I know this is what it is. I have enough of that, at least intellectual understanding of it. And then one of the things which will happen is when you keep doing it and you really stick to it and you start to actually get some like meditative experiences and some results in it, that can really dispel a lot of your doubts because it's like, you've seen some of the results for yourself and you've seen the benefits of it. So what can happen is when you get to, a certain level of concentration, you get these experiences. It's called piti, or it means like rapture. So you might feel like you're floating. You might feel like your body is expanding to, as big as the room, as big as the country, as big as the planet, or you might feel like waves of pleasure coming over you and like all these different experiences. And my teacher, Lumpur Biak, he would always say is if someone can just get one experience of piti, if they can just keep at it until they get an experience like this, then they'll understand the benefits and the importance of meditation. So when you start getting to something like that and you get the results, then it can help dispel the doubts. But so these five hindrances, they're categories. These aren't, this isn't exhaustive of everything which is ever, will ever come up in your meditation, but these do cover a lot of these difficulties that all of us face in the meditation. And it's good to remember all of us, face these. So there was one, a lot of the advice the Buddha gave for dealing with sleepiness was actually he gave it to one of his main students, this one monk. And it was like the week leading up to when the monk ended up becoming enlightened. And so even though he was like, a really important student of the Buddha, even in his practice, he was coming up with through all these hardships, and he just was really suffering with sleepiness in his meditation. So, it happens to all of us. Yeah, so I'd like to offer this to everyone as a bit of a encouragement and a bit of a reflection for this evening.